Hi everyone. Hi, this is Fractal Dementia, and what I'm going to be doing today, this is the first in a series of tutorials that I will be giving on the PySwarm application. The current version as of this tutorial is version 0.5. And what I'd like to do is kind of get things rolling here with what you need to do for downloading and installing the required components so that you can begin using the PySwarm application. Then I want to cover some of the basics of the interface application, what I call PIA, which I've developed as an interface so that you can actually set the necessary parameters and import that into your Carrera scenes for animation. Then I want to talk just briefly about applying the PySwarm rules, and then what I'm going to do is actually go through real quickly the sequence of steps that you need to do to actually create an animation. So a lot of this is going to be kind of basic information, but it's at least enough to kind of get you started. So let's get going with that. Okay, the first thing I want to do is talk about what's necessary for downloading and installing the necessary components for running the PySwarm application. And now previously I've posted information at other locations and I had it on the user's guide, but since I'm not actually going to be distributing a user's guide anymore, what I did was I started a wiki site for the information related to PySwarm. Let me just show you basically how to get there. You can type pyswarm.wikia.com and that will bring you to the main page for the PySwarm application. And from the home page, one of the things that you'll see is there's a section called the latest release. So if you want to just kind of know what is the latest version of what is available, this will just show you a real quick version. If you click on that, it basically will tell you at this point version 0.5 is the most recent version of PySwarm, and that for the interface application PIA it's version 1.0. And then there's a link that actually provides additional information about what's necessary for downloading and installing the components for PySwarm. And there really are three parts that you need to be able to have installed on your Windows-based system in order to use this. And real briefly, what I'm going to do is, and there's a lot more information in here about what's necessary for getting the right versions and installing it. You'll find all of that information on this page. The first thing that you're going to need is the Python programming language. And again, the links to get access to that are provided here. I'm not going to actually go through that. You'll also need the PyCarrera plugin for Carrera. Again, there's information here about what's necessary for downloading and installing that, and even for verifying that it is actually in there. Where I want to really focus on here is the latest version of PySwarm. And so what I've done is provided a whole lot of information about where to get the basic information. And the way you get that is by clicking on this particular link. It will pull up the zip file that contains the three files that are part of the PySwarm application. And to download it, you just simply click on File and then go to Download, and that should initiate the download process. And you'll see that basically what I've got is downloaded this. And when I've completed the download, I should be able to go to my download folder, grab the zip file, unzip it, and then put the folder. And what I would suggest is that you move the folder into a separate location. So what I've done is I went ahead and created my own folder on my Documents folder area, and it contains those three files. So this is really where we're going to begin stepping through what's necessary. Now you'll notice that as part of the file systems, there's the application called PIA, which is the interface application that I've talked about. There's a shell, which is the most recent version of all the Python script that's necessary for building the PySwarm scripts that you need to import into your Carrera file. And then finally there's a Carrera test scene, and it basically is sort of a scene that you can have available to open to test out your ideas and thoughts, and also just sort of run experiments. So all the different parameters that are available through the PIA application, you can test out what those are and just see what kind of results you get and play around with it. That's really what its intent is. Okay, so at this point, what I've stepped you through is sort of where to go to get information about how to download and install the various components that's required. The Python programming language, the PyCarrera plugin, as I mentioned, which are required. Also the downloading of the latest information for PySwarm. And then from that now we've created a folder that exists out on our hard drive, and that contains the 3 files as that's part of the PySwarm package. Now there's one more step that I would suggest that you do, and as part of the installation, just to kind of make it easier to get access to the interface application. What I do is I will take the application and drag it down and install it into the taskbar so that I have easier access to being able to use it. Now at this point we're pretty much ready to go, so I'm going to start the application. There is no, let me just mention, there is no requirement to register the application with the Windows system. It's a fairly simple, straightforward application, and because of that it runs without having to actually do any special installation process. Okay, so let me just quickly go through the organization of the application so you get an idea about how to use this in order to generate the scripts to import into your Carrera scenes. As I mentioned, along the top you'll see a number of tabs. Each of the tabs represent access to certain parameters that allow you to define how the PySwarm script is going to be developed and then imported into your scenes. So for example, for general scene information like the time parameters, how often to set the keyframes and whether to clear them at the start of the import is all defined under one tab. Then there are information related to the voids themselves. So the name of the voids, the number of voids, and then some information, for example, about how to set initial positioning and heading, as well as motion parameters. The tabs after that, you'll notice that there are 8 of them. Each tab represents a specific rule. You'll also notice that some of the tabs have been highlighted. The reason why this is so that you can quickly get an idea of which of the rules are currently have been activated. So in essence, when I click on a tab, if I were to deactivate that rule, which means that I'm not applying it for the generation of the script, you'll notice that the tab itself is no longer highlighted. So I can quickly look at the tabs and know which specific rules I currently have active, and in this case I currently have separation and alignment are the only 2 of the 8 rules that currently are activated. So as I mentioned, each of these tabs contain information for the parameters associated with those rules. Now below the section for the tabs, you'll notice that there's a section called PySwarm Projects. Basically, I decided to, because I for one don't like to work on one project at a time. Often I'll have 4 or 5 projects that I'm currently working on related to PySwarm. I wanted to be able to set it up so that I could have access to whatever the current set of parameters that I have set for each of the projects. So what I did was I created a section that allows you to create up to 9 projects that you can currently be working on at a time, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about how to set up your projects independently, but basically the key point here is that you have a default setting which is always the first entry into the project set. In addition, with the pull down, I can add new projects, I can select them, and I can change the parameters associated with that particular project and not have to worry about losing information that I have set for other projects. then finally at the bottom of the screen there's two more buttons. One is obviously the exit button, which allows me to close the application when I'm ready. But I also wanted to just quickly touch on this one button here called Online Help. I set up the application in a way that if for online help information, there are two ways of getting information. One is that if you hold the mouse cursor over any of the fields, you'll get a quick hint item which gives you a little bit of information about that particular item that you're hovering over. Sometimes that may not be enough information. You want to know a little bit more about it, or maybe look at, are there specific examples, or are there certain kinds of hints or things that you need to know about in setting these fields. And so what I did was I added an online help feature, which that if I click that, it will automatically load in the PySwarm Wiki the page associated with that particular tab that I have selected. So in this case, since I had the scene tab selected, when I clicked on the help, it comes up with a set of information, and you'll notice that there are within here tabs for each of the sections that are defined for that particular tab in my set. And if I click on that, it gives me some information, first of all, about each of the parameters, and in addition, if there's any tips or limitations that might be related to that. And then finally at the very end of each page, and I will be doing a lot more updates to this, but I plan to put some examples and scenarios and kind of situations to consider as part of those particular set of parameters. So even if you get lost on this and you're not sure about how to apply it, just realize that you can always, when you have the application up and running, if I'm, for example, looking at the containment rule, I can always click on the online help and it will pull up information that's specifically related to that and allows me to read a whole lot more about information related to those particular parameters. Okay, so now that I've covered the basic ideas of the application that you use to define the parameters that you import into your Carrera animation sequence, let me just show how you go through the entire process beginning to end. What I did was I started Carrera, and inside of Carrera then I'm going to go to Open, and what I'm going to do is, instead of in this particular sequence, since I'm just talking about getting started, what I'm going to do is actually import the test scene. Now the assumption here is that you're going to create your own test scene animation. So there's going to be a separate tutorial about how to set this up, but in essence you'll notice that over here I've got my voids defined. I have 20 of them, and this is just a basic simple object that I created that allows me to sort of study the various sets of rules that I have defined, the various parameters, and then look at the resulting animation sequence so I can get an idea real quickly about which rules to apply, how to apply them to create my animation sequences. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my PySwarm Interface application and show just how quick and easy it is to actually generate an animation sequence for a scene that you have set up. Now in this particular example, what I'm going to do is the first thing I need to do is to create a project. So I'm going to create a new project and call this tutorial, and when I click OK, it's going to automatically insert a new set of parameter records that I can use now for this particular scene that I'm going to create. Now for this particular animation, what I'm going to do is just quickly go through this. I'm going to create another tutorial or set of tutorials that will go into a lot more detail around each of these parameters. But real quickly, I'm going to set up a 15-second animation sequence. I'm going to do insert 10 keyframes per second, and I'm going to clear the keyframes at the start. You'll notice that there are keyframes already inserted, so I'm going to overwrite those. I'm also going to manipulate a camera. In this case, I'm going to call it the conical camera, which is a camera that I already haven't seen. You'll have to make sure that when you set the camera name and a focus that you're using existing objects in your scene. And for the offset, I'm going to set this at 25, 25, and 25. I'm going to manipulate a focus, which is called camera focus. Again, it's an object directly in my scene, and this will force PySwarm to move that object to be at the center of the mass of all of the voids as they move about in the scene. Okay, for the voids, the name has to match the voids that I have defined here, which is void, not void, so I'm going to change this. I have 20 voids, so I'm going to leave that as is. Now for the initial positioning and heading settings, what I'm going to do is just leave this as their default, which is the current void positions and headings. And you'll notice that the voids have been randomly placed already within the scene. And I'm just going to leave them as they are, so they're going to basically move off in the direction that they're currently facing. Now I will need to give it a speed, so I'm going to give it an initial speed of 5 feet per second. And just for the sake of this simulation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to deactivate all of the rules. In other words, I'm not going to have any rules active. And what this will do in essence is it will create an animation sequence where the voids move off in the direction that they are moving and facing at the speed which I currently have set here, which is 5 feet per second. Now I basically have all of the information. I'm ready to go, so I'm going to click generate the script. I'm going to select the particular name, and in this case I'm going to select it as tutorial draft 1 to create the location for my script file that I'm going to import into Carrera. I'm going to save it off, and in this particular case it says it already exists. I'm going to replace it, and it says that the PySwarm script was successfully created. So I'm pretty much done at this point. All I have left to do is go back into Carrera. I go to import. I select my PyCarrera file for importing the script. I click open, and it will automatically go through the sequence of generating that 15-second sequence of animation that I've set in the interface application. So I exit this window, and at this point I can actually run this. So if I run it, you'll notice that the voids, as I mentioned, since there aren't any rules being applied, they're flying off in the direction that they were facing at the time that the animation began. If I go back and let's say look at it at a farther distance, and let me show you the sequence, you'll notice that it ends at 15 seconds, which was the duration of my time. But the intent of this obviously is that that's as easy as it is to actually import an animation sequence into Carrera. So if I were to, for example, if I didn't particularly like this sequence, if I want to go back and modify it, let me just show you how quickly I can do that. I'm going to go back into my interface application. This time I'm actually going to activate cohesion, separation, and alignment. I'm going to cause those to actually be part of the animation sequence. I'm going to leave all of the information the same. I'm going to generate my script, and in this case I'm going to call this draft 2 to give it a new name, and it's created successfully. I go into my Carrera scene, I import it, select the file, select open, and it generates the sequence, and when I exit I now have a new set of animation sequences. That's and basically I can create an animation sequence in less than a minute. So the intent of this is basically to show that it's very simple, very easy, very straightforward to be able to show the animation. I mentioned that I had set up one of the cameras to move with the animation sequence. So if I go back, I can select that particular camera, and this time when it shows the sequence, what it's going to do is as the voids move about, so will the camera. So it tracks along with the direction that the voids are heading. Okay, well that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. I'll have other tutorials that I will go through in much more detail about how to set and use the various parameters. I hope that you find this useful, and just play around with the application, try different settings. One of the things that you'll notice out of this is that very small adjustments in a few of the parameters can create completely different sets of behaviors in your animation objects. So again, you have to kind of play around with it, try different rules and see what effects that it has, and have fun with it. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.